All right, sorry about that. Every now and then the stream just freezes and then it just decides not to work. I don't know why it is. It just freezes sometimes. I reset my browser, I update everything, make sure everything's good, but it still just freezes sometimes. But oh well, no worries. We just takes a few minutes to kind of set it back up again. But let's kind of continue here. We can kind of continue with the discussion here on shallowing. And like I said, if you got questions about it, feel free to ask along the way. I'm trying to remember exactly where I was. But yeah, so early extension, how that shallows out the club. So we actually, we don't necessarily want to early extend. If you have a little bit of early extension, it's totally fine. I think people definitely overblow the whole thing where you have to stay perfectly in your posture all the time. The best players in the world, a lot of the best players in the world are not perfectly maintaining their posture. Rory McIlroy doesn't maintain his posture perfectly throughout the swing. Jack Nicklaus didn't. I mean, we're talking, those are two guys that have completed the Grand Slam, so multiple major champion. You can play good golf and come out of your posture. So, the only time I would say that it's really a big problem if it's excessive, right? So if you're coming into contact and your body's just straight up and down, and you're like this, yeah, you're probably going to play a lot better if you improve that. But if you're just your hips are kind of moving off a little bit and your head's kind of moving up a little bit and you're not coming into contact, standing, your body's not straight up and down vertical. If it's not excessive, it's not a big problem. I see a lot of videos of the instructors post, and it's nothing against them or anything. It's just what they believe, and everyone has different beliefs and that sort of thing. But they draw the line on the backside, they draw the line on the front side, and they say, hey, we gotta maintain those lines. And there are top players that do that. Adam Scott does that. But not everyone's going to be physically capable of doing that. And there are many, many, many high-level golfers that don't do that. Scotty Scheffler, for example. Now, he does kind of maintain the backside line, but his head moves away from, if you draw a line on the front of his head moves away from that as it goes, and it moves more away from it as he comes down, right? Tiger's head moves away from it. So there's high level players who don't maintain the headline and don't maintain the tush line and don't do both of them at the same time perfectly. It's just when it's really excessive is when it can be a problem. So don't really kill yourself trying to get, run yourself through the ringer trying to get to where you have perfect posture, because it's just not a trait that all the best golfers have. Focus on the things that all the best golfers do. And that's really what the Top Speed Golf system is, right? The Top Speed Golf system is not about perfectly staying in your posture, right? Top Speed Golf system is the things that we see all the best players do. So, yeah, that's, I just want to mention that because a lot of people, because of all the, it's something that a lot of people do, because this is really how we see a lot of things. Coming out of posture is something that many recreational golfers do and amateur golfers do, right? So when we look at our swings, right, when recreational golfers look at their swings, they're seeing that, right? And then they want to know how to fix it. And then those are the most popular videos on YouTube. And then when we see that, then there's more and more videos of it. And then everyone has this idea that, hey, we have to perfectly do that. But it's just not the reality, right? So keep that in mind. It's okay if we're coming up out of our posture a little bit. It's just when it's excessive when you may want to look at it. So yeah, that's one of them. Hip bumping, so really kind of creating, this kind of thing where this is really kind of goes hand in hand with dropping the shoulder early, because that's typically where the hip bump comes from. That does help to shout. So if I'm like this and then I bump my hip, that does shallow out the club. But again, that's going to lead to that's dropping that shoulder, right? So what you're typically going to see in the best players is that they actually steepen the club with the lower body, right? So what I mean is they flex the hips, right? So if I flex the hips, what's going to happen? The club's going to go that way. I rotate my hips, right? So if I rotate, where's the club going to go? It's going to steepen, right? So that's what they do with their lower body is they flex those hips, they rotate the body. Those are things that actually steepen the club, right? And then what they do is they shallow out the club with the upper body, right? Through the wrists, through the forearms, through my shoulder joint, those things that I talked about, through my spine angle, my spine, curving, side bend isn't coming down. Those are the things that they do to shallow out the club, right? And when you mix those together, you're going to get an overall, right? You're going to get an overall neutral, perfectly shallowing out the club, right? So if I did everything and I max out everything to shallow out the club, so let's say I stood up out of my posture, I didn't rotate, I bowed my wrist, I lowered my arms, I did that. Well, look, the club's just going to be way too far behind me. I'm too shallow, right? And then my club pass is going to get too much out to the right. In reality, I'm probably just not going to be able to hit the ball. I'm going to chunk the ball, top it, or whatever it is. So, like I said, you don't have to do every little thing to shallow out the club, right? You have to kind of come up with the thing that is kind of your special recipe, your swing signature to do that. So, the best way that I know of to find that is to use the blue brick, right? So here's the blue brick right here. If you're not familiar with the blue brick, you've been living under a rock, or you haven't seen our emails. We do send out a lot of emails for it. But basically, what it is, it's just training aid that Clay invented. He took a year or so to develop it. But shallowing is kind of the bread and butter. There's lots of other cool stuff you can do with this, but shallowing is kind of the bread and butter of the blue brick. So on here, you're going to see we got some shallowing. It says shallowing right here. And then you have these holes on there. So you're going to have a driver, a 6-iron, and a wedge. And the cool part is that those aren't the only clubs that you can use with this. You can really use every club in the bag with this, other than putter, basically. But anything you're making a full swing with, you're going to be able to use it on here. So I'll go over that real quickly since I mentioned it. So if you want to use any wedges, right? So for the sand, the one that's labeled sand wedge, any wedge you can use with that. So pitching wedge, approach wedge, gap wedge, whatever you want to call it. Typically that's going to be your wedge that's in the 50 to 52 degree range. And then your sand wedge, obviously you're going to be able to use that. So that's typically going to be anything in the 54 to 56 degree range. And then your lob wedge, which can be anything 58, 60, 62, even. The BX1 is a 63 degree wedge. You would be able to use it in the wedge slot, right? So that all those clubs, anything that is a wedge, use them in the wedge slot. Then from there, the 6-iron slot, anything from 9-iron all the way up to your hybrids, right? And probably even like some fairway, if you have shorter fairways. If you have like a 7-wood, you can probably use it in the 6-iron slot. And then for the driver slot, obviously you use driver, and I probably use 3-wood as well in that slot. Outside of that, like I said, you can use it. The 5-wood, you can probably go either or. I probably use the 5-wood in the 6-iron slot, to be honest. Unless you just have like a longer 3-wood, because really that's mostly what determines the slot that you're going to use is the length of the club, right? That's mostly what's going to determine it, because the longer the club is, the flatter the vertical swing plane is, right? The shorter the club is, the more upright the vertical swing plane is, right? So that's just what you would use for that. So now let's talk about what we would do to work on shallowing out the club. And again, you don't have to think about every little thing. You can just think about this one thing. So I'm going to be demonstrating with a wedge here. So I'm just going to put that in the wedge slot. There is a hole that that you would put the stick into and point it toward the target. My wall's right here, so I'm not going to be able to do that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to place this up against the blue brick there, and it's going to act as the same because that's pointing toward the target, because that hole is like right there. So it just moves it a ½ inch closer to me, which is not a big deal. All right. So now here's what I would say. If you're someone who is really struggling and coming down steep, you're coming way over the top, I would start out with the ball at least 2 club heads away from the stick. So 1 club head, 2 club head. That's where I would put it. The reason is that if you move it really, really close to the stick to begin with, and you're someone who's coming down steep, you're almost guaranteed you're going to hit this stick, right? So, and also, if you are someone that's in that category, highly recommend a pool noodle to put over the stick. I wish we could, I wish Shotcraft could include a pool noodle with every brick, but unfortunately, these things are not very expensive, but they're very expensive to ship because they're large. I think I went to Walmart and I bought like a bundle of them. I think I bought like 15 of them because we use blue bricks at the clinics and we use the pool noodles on them. And they're like $1 a piece. So go to your local store. Hopefully they got pool supplies. Summer's coming up here. If you live in a winter place, hopefully they got some in stock, but usually they're $1 or $2. Take it, slide it over the top of that thing, and then now it won't totally prevent the stick from breaking. It'll be less likely to break, and then if it does break, it's breaking inside the noodle instead of breaking outside. Breaking and then pieces flying everywhere and things like that. So that's why I definitely recommend that. So, like I said, I would start club head, 2 club heads, maybe even a little bit more if you're coming down really steep. And if you feel like you're going to hit this thing, then move farther away from it until you feel like you're not going to, and then gradually work closer and closer and closer to it, because we have to understand there isn't anything magic about this. So just having this here isn't just going to make you suddenly shallow at the club. We have the task of, hey, I got to swing underneath this, right? That's really how you do it. You don't have to think about every little thing. You just think, how can I get myself to swing underneath this? So I would just take it. I would maybe even do practice swings, just swinging nice and slow. And in doing that, you will intuitively do a lot of the things that I talked about. You will intuitively rotate the wrist, you intuitively lower the arms, because if you don't, you're going to hit the stick or you're going to swing over it, right? So just go slow and think, hey, I got to get underneath this. Now, if you find that you are standing up out of it to do it, right, which that is a way to do it. Like if I'm standing here and then I go whoop like that, I'm standing way up out of it and I'm getting underneath it, but that's not the way I want to do it. What I would recommend doing is put this stick to where it's like covering your hand as you're coming down. So what that means is, from the face-on view here, if I'm coming down, if I lead arm parallel, I want to have that stick kind of in line with my hand there. So if I have it like that, I have it covering my hand, right? I set up like this. I got that covering my hand. Well, if I come down and I go like that, well, I'm gonna hit it, right? So I can't really stand way up out of it. I have to stay in my posture to a certain extent to be able to get my hands in the club to work underneath that. So start out with some shorter swings, maybe some slower swings without a ball. If it's something that's really, really difficult for you to do, that's what I would recommend doing. I would also recommend accompanying this with the 20-minute shallowing fix. So working through the 20-minute shallowing fix, do drill number 1. You won't be using this for drill number 1. Drill number 1 is just about getting a stronger grip, essentially getting the club face more closed, because a big reason why a lot of people come down steep is because the club face is wide open, right? And you might be wondering, well, what does that have to do with coming down steep? Well, if my club face is very open because I have a very weak grip, or I have a weak grip, maybe I'm cupping my wrists a ton, doing things like that to open up the face, then what I may do is I may swing this club more in the direction to the left direction for a right-handed golfer to get the club face to point more in the direction of the target. Intuitively, that's what a lot of people do. So if we were to have that club face wide open and then also shallow out the club, well, that ball is going to start right and it's going to slice more to the right for a right-hander. And intuitively, most of us just aren't going to do that, right? Intuitively, we're going to tend to try to get that club to point more in the direction of the target. And one way you can do that is by coming down steep. So that's one of the things that you have to do is to get the club face more closed. In drill number 1, that's what you do. You're just getting the club face more closed. You're not actually shallowing out the club at that point. You're just taking the first step to get you to where it makes it a lot easier, right? So that's the first thing. And then drill number 1, you got to get 10 hooks in a row. If we can get 10 balls in a row that significantly hook, then we know the club face is closed. It doesn't matter where it starts. It just matters that it hooks, right? Then what we can do is we can put the blue brick in here and swing under it, swing to the right with that closed face, get the ball to start to the right with the closed face, and that'll get that ball to hook, start to the right and hook, get 10 in a row, and then you go from there, and then you tone it down, right? You tone it down, you get to where you're swinging just underneath this, and if you're still hooking it, then weaken the grip a little bit, be a little less strong with the grip, and you'll be in a good spot. So it makes it to where you don't have to think about every little thing. Now, what you can do if you're really struggling, what you can do is think about, okay, well, I need to lower my arms, right? I would definitely be thinking about that. So a good thought for that, if you feel like you're leaving your arms up and you're rotating, a good thought for that would be, I'm going to feel like I keep my back to the target and I bring my arms down. And I would try to feel like I'm putting my hands toward my right pocket, right? So my back is to the target, hands toward my pocket, then I rotate through. You can see I'm nowhere near hitting that. Now, that's an exaggeration, but that's maybe what you need to feel, because if you're going like that, right, then you need to feel that. And hopefully the reality will be something more like that, right? So that's what I would recommend doing, right? Hopefully that all makes sense. If you have questions about that, put them in the chat. We will answer them tomorrow, initially to start the office hours. Office hours tomorrow is at 3 p.m. Eastern time. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you next time.